Hey, good morning, guys. I'm just going to do a short little video. I've not done a lot of talking about this old lathe I have. This is an Atlas. It's a 10-inch model, and it's one of Atlas's original lathes. This is a Model 10D, and this lathe was made in 1936 or 37, one of those 2 years. And Atlas made a lot of changes to their lathes in subsequent years, I guess, as they learned what people wanted and that sort of thing. But this is a nice old lathe. It's still in good shape. Nothing is broken on this lathe. Now, you notice here it doesn't have a quick change gearbox, and I have threaded on this lathe, actually quite a bit. But I have all of the change gears that I need for any sort of gear arrangement. Not that I use this lathe for that sort of thing anymore. In fact, I had this whole banjo drop down out of engagement. So none of this gear train turns, the lead screw doesn't turn, and nor will it, because I have that 12-inch lathe there as my workhorse lathe. So, but what I do on this lathe is second operations, small things, such as what I'm getting ready to show you. But this lathe came with just about every piece of tooling you can imagine for one of these. That is a steady rest you see there on that shelf, the follower rest right next to it, and then that's the headstock chuck, that Jacob's headstock chuck. That is the chuck that I use on this lathe most often. And then there's a couple of quick change tool posts on that I don't really use, but they just stuff I happen to have. And then here is the Atlas threading attachment, the threading tool, and I have used this when I have threaded on this lathe, and it does a great job. Here's a full set of the boring bars that came with the lathe, and then a straight tool holder and a right hand tool holder. I have the left hand mounted down here in the lantern tool post. The thing about this lathe is you have to make sure you oil these plain bearings. These are Babbitt bearings in here, and you just give them a few drops of oil in each of these cups. This is the original motor, and it has oil cups too. You have to oil those from time to time. And this is the counter shaft assembly here, and normally I keep it like this, and that is the slack position. So when you want to use it, you just roll that back, and that tightens all your belts. Here's the lead screw, and as I said, I don't even use the lead screw on this anymore. Because all the feeding on this is just done by hand. Now, if you notice, this lathe has no way wipers and really no provision to mount them. This is all sloped, and that, I think, is a lesson Atlas learned because subsequent lathes had way wipers. But I just make sure that I wipe these ways a lot, and then I oil them with way oil. Up there's all the different lubricants that I use on all the machines here in the shop. And that little Eagle oiler there in the center, that's way oil. And then this is lubricant for the plain bearings, and just various lubricants I use on the different machines. I just keep all my oil cans up there. But what I'm going to be doing with this lathe is modifying some of those copper rivets that I bought. And I had bought number 12 copper rivets, and turns out number 14 rivets were more suited to what I was doing with the knife sheath. So I've been modifying them as I need them. So I have a somewhat smaller chuck. This just has a number 3 Morse taper adapter that goes back into the spindle. And then on this kind of lathe with these exposed threads, this is where your normal chucks would screw onto this thing. But you have to put this thread protector on there to keep from damaging these threads. And this is about the heaviest chuck, this one and this one here. Now I have a 4-jaw chuck and 3-jaw chuck for this lathe that never get put on because, as I said, this is not my workhorse lathe. This lathe has earned an easy life after all these years, but everything works. The back gears, as I said, I have threaded on this lathe, but you know, the lathe's done its work for that sort of thing. Now what I have on here, I removed the chip guard, but this is an aluminum stop that I made. It has a dovetail cut into it, and it just clamps on the dovetail waves of the saddle here, the cross slide. And it's just to stop so I can come up against for what I'm doing, and you'll see for the little rivets that I'm adapting on this thing. That's just a quick way to get your reference and get yourself down to diameter without having to measure anything. So I'll put this camera on a tripod and I'll show you a few shots of me modifying my rivets. One of the neatest things about this old lathe, besides the fact that it's just a nice little old lathe, was when I got it, and I got this lathe from a friend that I used to work with. This was his father's lathe. I don't know when his father got it, but his dad was a machinist and a gunsmith, and he had this one in his basement. But this lathe came with the original dauber for tailstock lubricant that stores in this little cup right here. And I have some high pressure lube in there for whenever I use a dead center, but if I do anything between centers in this lathe, I just have a ball bearing center. So I wanted to show you that. And then on my clamp here that I made, as I said, I just cut a dovetail out of some aluminum, and then the set screw, when I tighten it, pushes against a piece of brass rod that actually tightens to the dovetail so it doesn't damage this. And as I said, the lathe is in a remarkably good shape for its age. But I'm going to put the chip guard back on here, and it just attaches with a screw, and it just goes right over that stop. But when I am turning stuff to a certain diameter, I'll just set that stop after the first one, and then I don't have to think about dimensions anymore. I could just change the stock in the chuck and just go for it. Okay, so here, just to show you the comparison, this is a number 12 copper rivet, and this is the size I'd rather the head be. And the difference in these rivets size-wise seems to be just the diameter of the head and then the burr that goes on it. So this is closer to a number 14 copper rivet, and the next time I order rivets, that's what I'll be ordering. But I'm not going to waste these number 12s just because they're a little too large in the head. The post size seems to be the same. So all I do on the lathe here is, now this headstock chuck, the Jacobs headstock chuck, it won't screw down tight enough to grip this post. So that's why I put this is just the tailstock chuck out of my big lathe, which happens to have a number 3 Morse taper. So I just stick that in there, and for light work like this, I don't even need a chuck key for this. I just hold the counter shaft, tighten that by hand, and this tool, I have ground this tool especially for this job, and I've honed it. It's high-speed steel, and it's pretty darn sharp. So got everything set on center, and again, I have already have my stop set back there, so I know when I can't advance anymore that I'm down to diameter. This lathe runs nice and quietly. As I said, the lathe's in good shape, but I'm going to take a couple of cuts here. I'm just going to come up here and touch it. And then it's just a matter of turning it down until I hit my stop back there. And that stop is also handy if you're doing threading, and when you return your cross slide to 0, you can return it against your stop instead of trying to read these tiny little 1-inch dials on this lathe. I don't know if you can see them or not. I mean, these are hard to read even with an optivisor. That's another improvement Atlas made over the years. But you just hit your stop, you're back to 0, and then you just advance your compound when you're threading. But as I said, I don't thread on this lathe anymore, so let's get back to what I was doing. Get you in for a good shot here. And if you keep a nice sharp tool, copper, which is notoriously hard to turn, it gets pretty easy if you keep a nice honed sharp tool. So I feel that I'm against my stop, So we're done with that part. Then the only thing I do for any little burr, I just take a very fine little file here, and I just go on one side and then the other, and that takes care of any burr. And then I just again hold the counter shaft, loosen the chuck, and then that rivet is now down to size. I'll show you what I do for the burrs. Let me get set up for that. Alright, this is how I deal with these copper burrs. I just made this little jig, if you wanted to call it that. It's just a piece of 1/8 inch rod that I threaded. It's threaded 540. What I do is I thread my burrs on there, and I think I have 5 stacked on here now. I've done up to 10. So I'll get that whole deal inserted into the chuck, then I push that back tight against that collar. Now I'm tight against the chuck jaws. And I tighten the key pretty tightly because I want to grip that shaft nice. And then I just take a little pair of slip joints and I'll cinch it up. So I can turn these and they won't spin on me. Now you'll notice when I turn this thing on, this little knurled nut wobbles all over the place, and that really doesn't concern me. Because what we're doing is not that accurate at all. We're making leather rivets. I just want to reduce them in size. And since my stop was already set and the center line and the diameter is all referenced off the center of the spindle, I don't have to mess with this. You see how that wobbles around, but it's not really going to matter because once we turn these a couple times, it'll be nice and true. So I just want to touch right there. And then again, just taking light passes on that copper with a sharp tool. It won't take very long to get these turned down to diameter as well. And I made sure the collar and the nut were smaller than the diameter I was looking for the finished size of these burrs. So I don't have to worry about striking them with the tool. Alright, I'm against my stop. I feel that. So I'm going to take one more little finishing pass. And then again, I finish with this little fine file. Pretty sure there's going to be a burr on this end one. So I just want to hit it at an angle like that, clean that up, and then just a little draw across all of them. And it didn't take any time at all to turn these 5 down to what I needed them to be. So there you go, and there's 5 copper burrs ready to use. And I think what I ordered, there were 250 rivets, complete rivets, burrs and posts. And yeah, when I'm through these and I've adapted all of those, then yeah, I'll order number 14s from now on. But until then, it's the cheap guy in me that won't let me just let these things sit and go ahead and order the 14s and use those. I want to make use of these. I don't want to waste them. But the whole thing gave me a chance to show you guys my Atlas 10D. And I love this little lathe, and it does the job for me when it's a small job. So, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys again. Have a great day.